That woman stole from me, and I have proof." She held up her phone, showing a photo of the bracelet, inside a bag that wasn't hers. Diane Carter stood frozen in the airport terminal, her hands shaking as every eye in the gate area turned toward her. The white woman dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her voice trembling just enough to sound believable, her designer purse clutched dramatically to her chest. What she didn't know was that Diane had already made one phone call, and the person on the other end was already on the way. A white woman planted a diamond bracelet in a black woman's bag, then called security with tears in her eyes. Diane Carter, 48, had been flying for business for over 20 years, and she'd never missed a flight. Not once. But as she stood in the Delta Gate area at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, watching two security officers approach her with grim faces, she knew today was going to be different. The white woman stood 10 feet away, her face flushed, her hand pointing directly at Diane. "That's her," the woman said, her voice loud enough for the entire gate to hear. "She took my bracelet." Diane's heart slammed against her ribs. "I'm sorry, what?" Diane said, her voice measured but firm. The woman stepped closer, her expression a perfect mix of shock and righteous anger. She was in her early 50s, blonde hair in a sleek bob, wearing a cream-colored blazer and pearls. Her name, Diane would later learn, was Patricia Zimmerman. "My diamond bracelet," Patricia said, her voice shaking. "It was in my purse. I stepped away for 1 minute to use the restroom, and when I came back it was gone, and I saw you standing right next to my seat." Diane blinked. "I didn't touch your purse." "Then why do I have a photo of my bracelet inside your bag?" The crowd gasped. Patricia held up her phone. On the screen was a clear image, a sparkling diamond bracelet, sitting on top of what looked like a black leather toiletry bag. Diane's stomach dropped. She recognized that bag. It was hers. "That's impossible," Diane said. "I've never seen that bracelet in my life." "Then you won't mind if security checks your bag," Patricia said sweetly. The two airport security officers, one older white man, one younger Latina woman, stepped forward. "Ma'am," the male officer said to Diane, "we're going to need you to open your carry-on." Diane's mind raced. She was a corporate compliance officer for a Fortune 500 company in Houston. She'd built a career on following rules, double-checking facts, staying calm under pressure. But right now, none of that mattered. She was a black woman being accused of theft in public. And everyone was staring. "Of course," Diane said quietly. She pulled her bag from her shoulder and unzipped it slowly, her hands trembling. The female officer reached inside and pulled out Diane's toiletry bag, the same black leather one from the photo. She unzipped it. And there, sitting on top of Diane's makeup, was a diamond bracelet. The crowd erupted in whispers. Diane's blood ran cold. "I didn't put that there," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I swear to God I didn't." "Save it," Patricia snapped. "I have the photo, I have the evidence, and now you have my bracelet in your bag." The male officer's expression hardened. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us." "No," Diane said, her voice stronger now. "I'm telling you someone planted that." "Sure they did," Patricia said, rolling her eyes. She turned to the officers. "I want to press charges, full prosecution. I'm not letting her get away with this." Diane felt the world tilting. She looked around the gate. Passengers were recording on their phones. Others whispered behind their hands. A mother pulled her child closer, as if Diane were dangerous. No one was defending her. No one even looked like they believed her. "Please," Diane said, looking directly at the female officer. "Check the time stamp on that photo. Check the cameras. I haven't been anywhere near her seat." The officer hesitated. But Patricia was faster. "She's lying. She took it and now she's trying to manipulate you." The male officer reached for his radio. We're going to need a supervisor at gate C-29. Diane's breath came in short, shallow bursts. This was really happening. She was about to be arrested. But here's the part that changed everything. Diane pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my attorney," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "You can call whoever you want from the security office," the male officer said. "No," Diane said, "I'm calling him right now." She didn't wait for permission. She dialed. The phone rang once, twice. Then a deep, calm voice answered. "Diane." "Marcus," she said, her voice cracking just slightly, "I need you." Marcus Holland was one of the top criminal defense attorneys in Dallas. He was also Diane's husband. "Where are you?" he asked, his tone shifting immediately from casual to alert. "DFW, Gate C-29. A woman is accusing me of stealing her bracelet. She has a photo of it in my bag and security found it in my toiletry kit. Marcus, I didn't take it. Someone put it there." There was a pause. Then Marcus's voice came back, calm and lethal. "Don't say another word, not one. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He hung up. Diane lowered the phone and looked at the officers. "My attorney is on his way," she said. "I'm not going anywhere until he gets here." The male officer frowned. "Ma'am, you don't have a choice." "Actually, she does," the female officer interrupted quietly. She looked at Diane with something that might have been sympathy. "If she's not under arrest, she has the right to wait for counsel." The male officer looked annoyed but didn't argue. Patricia, however, was furious. "Are you kidding me?" she hissed. "She stole from me, arrest her." "We'll wait for the supervisor," the female officer said firmly. Patricia's jaw tightened, but she stepped back, arms crossed. Diane sat down in the nearest chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She was shaking. But she didn't cry. She refused to give them that. If only Patricia knew who was about to walk through that terminal. 12 minutes later, Marcus Holland strode into the gate area like a storm rolling in. He was tall, broad-shouldered, in a charcoal suit and burgundy tie. His expression was calm, but his eyes were hard as stone. He walked directly to Diane, placed a hand on her shoulder and looked down at her. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Marcus turned to the officers. "I'm Marcus Holland, Ms. Carter's attorney. What's the situation?" The male officer straightened slightly. "Sir, your client has been accused of theft. We found the stolen item in her possession." "Accused," Marcus repeated. "Not charged, not arrested, accused." "There's evidence," Patricia interjected. Stepping forward, "I have a photo." Marcus turned his gaze to her, and she actually took a step back. "And you are?" he asked, his tone polite but cold. "Patricia Zimmerman, the victim." "Ms. Zimmerman," Marcus said slowly, "did you see my client take your bracelet?" "Well, no, but—" "Did anyone see her take it?" "She was standing right next to." "That's not an answer. Did anyone witness the alleged theft?" Patricia's face flushed. "I have a photo of the bracelet in her bag." "A photo you took," Marcus said, "of a bag you had access to." The air went electric. Patricia's eyes widened. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm clarifying the facts," Marcus said. "You claim my client stole your bracelet, but you have no witnesses. You have a photo, which you took, of an item inside a bag that was, I assume, unattended at some point." "I didn't plant it," Patricia sputtered. "I didn't say you did," Marcus said calmly, "but it's interesting that you went there." The supervisor arrived, a black man in his 50s, name tag reading James Whitaker, security supervisor. He looked at the crowd, then at the officers. "What's going on?" The male officer explained quickly. James listened, his face unreadable. Then he turned to Diane. "Ma'am, do you consent to a bag search?" Marcus answered before Diane could. She's already been searched without consent. The item was found. At this point, we're questioning the legitimacy of the evidence. James raised an eyebrow. How so? The accuser has a photo of the item inside my client's bag, a photo taken before security was called, which means she either saw the bracelet in the bag and waited to report it, or she placed it there herself. Patricia's face went white. That's insane. Then let's check the cameras, Marcus said. This gate has full surveillance. Let's see where Ms. Carter was when the bracelet allegedly went missing. Let's see who had access to her bag. James nodded slowly. That's reasonable. This is ridiculous, Patricia shouted. I'm the victim here. Then the cameras will prove it, Marcus said evenly. James turned to the officers. Take Ms. Zimmerman's statement. Pull the footage from the last hour. I want timestamps on everything, when she left her seat, when she came back, when she took that photo. Patricia opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. For the first time, she looked nervous. But this was only the beginning. They moved to a private security office. Diane sat beside Marcus, her hands still trembling. Patricia sat across from them, her lawyer-turned expression now icy. James pulled up the surveillance footage on a large monitor. Let's start with when you left for the restroom, he said to Patricia. The video showed Patricia standing, glancing around, then walking toward the restrooms. Timestamp, 2:47 p.m. She returned 4 minutes later. Timestamp, 2:51 p.m. There, Patricia said, pointing. When I came back, my bracelet was gone. James fast-forwarded. The video showed Patricia checking her purse, then looking around frantically. Then her eyes landed on Diane, who was sitting 3 rows away, reading a book. Patricia approached Diane's row. Diane's bag was on the seat next to her. And then, clear as day, Patricia leaned down, said something, and Diane looked up. They exchanged a few words. Then Patricia walked away. But not before the camera caught her hand, hovering over Diane's bag, for just a second. Marcus leaned forward. What did you just do? I asked her if she'd seen my bracelet, Patricia said quickly. Your hand, Marcus said. Play that back. James rewound, played it again. Patricia's hand dipped into Diane's bag. The room went silent. Patricia started. You planted it, Diane whispered, her voice shaking with fury. You put your own bracelet in my bag. That's not. Why, Marcus demanded. Why would you do that? Patricia's mouth opened and closed. Then her face twisted into something ugly. Because people like her get away with everything, she hissed. Diane's breath caught. People like me, she repeated. You know what I mean, Patricia snapped. Say it, Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. Patricia didn't. But she didn't have to. James stood. Ms. Zimmerman, you've just admitted on camera to filing a false police report and planting evidence. That's a crime. Patricia's face crumbled. I didn't admit anything. You said people like her get away with everything, James said. And we have you on video planting the bracelet. I'm calling the police. Patricia shot to her feet. You can't, I'm the victim. No, Diane said, standing as well. Her voice was quiet, but it cut like glass. You're a liar and a racist, and now everyone's going to know it. Patricia lunged forward, and for a moment, Diane thought she might actually try to hit her. But Marcus stepped between them. Don't, he said quietly. Patricia backed off, trembling with rage. And just when things seemed settled, the second revelation hit. James's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, then looked up at Patricia. Ms. Zimmerman, have you filed theft reports before? Patricia's face went pale. What? I just got a message from our database. Your name is flagged. You filed 3 theft claims at airports in the last 18 months. Marcus's eyes narrowed. 3. James scrolled through his phone. Chicago O'Hare, LaGuardia, and Houston Hobby, all with similar circumstances, missing jewelry, accusations against other passengers. Were any prosecuted? Marcus asked. James shook his head. All dropped, insufficient evidence. Diane felt her knees go weak. This woman had done this before. She's running a scam, Marcus said. I am not, Patricia started. You accuse someone of theft, plant evidence, and then what? Marcus pressed. File an insurance claim, sue the airline. What's the end game? Patricia didn't answer. But her silence said everything. James made a call. Within minutes, 2 police officers arrived. Ms. Patricia Zimmerman, one of them said, you're being detained for filing a false police report, evidence tampering and fraud. Patricia's face went from red to white. You can't do this, she whispered. We just did, the officer said. They led her out in handcuffs. The gate area, still full of passengers, went absolutely silent as they watched her walk past. Diane stood in the doorway of the security office, watching. She should have felt victorious. But all she felt was exhausted. An hour later, Diane and Marcus sat in a quiet corner of the terminal. Her flight had long since left. She'd rebooked for the next morning. You okay? Marcus asked, handing her a bottle of water. Diane took a long drink, then shook her head. No, not really. You were incredible in there. I was terrified. You were both. Diane looked down at her hands. They were still shaking. Marcus, if you hadn't come, if they hadn't pulled that footage. Don't, he said firmly, don't go there. But it's true, I could have been arrested, charged, my name would have been destroyed, my career. But it wasn't, Marcus said, because you stayed calm, you called me, you demanded the truth, you didn't let them railroad you. Diane's eyes filled with tears. I was one phone call away from losing everything. Marcus took her hand, but you made that call, and that made all the difference. If only she knew how much bigger this story was about to become. 3 days later, Diane sat in a conference room at Marcus's law firm. Across the table sat a woman named Angela Price, a federal investigator with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Ms. Carter, Angela began, we've been investigating Patricia Zimmerman for the past 6 months. Diane blinked. You have? Angela nodded. She's been running a sophisticated insurance fraud scheme. She files false theft reports, plants evidence, sometimes even stages incidents. Then she files claims with her insurance company and in some cases sues the airlines or the accused parties. How much has she stolen? Marcus asked. Over $400,000 in the last 3 years. Diane felt sick. And you're telling me I'm not the first person she's done this to? You're the 7th, Angela said quietly, but you're the first one who fought back hard enough to expose her. Diane's chest tightened. What happened to the others? 2 were arrested. 1 was prosecuted but later acquitted. The others settled quietly to avoid public scandal. Angela leaned forward. Ms. Carter, 6 of the 7 victims were black women, professional, well-dressed, traveling alone. The words landed like a punch. She targeted us, Diane whispered. Yes. Diane closed her eyes, because she thought no one would believe us. Exactly, Angela said. She relied on racial bias. She knew that airport security, gate agents, even other passengers would be more likely to believe a white woman's tears over a black woman's denial. Marcus's jaw tightened, and it worked until now. Angela nodded. We want you to testify. We're building a federal case, fraud, evidence tampering, hate crime enhancements. With your testimony and the airport footage, we can put her away for years. Diane looked at Marcus. He squeezed her hand. It's your choice, he said quietly. Diane thought about the other women, the ones who'd been arrested, humiliated, destroyed. She thought about how close she'd come. And she thought about all the black women who'd be targeted next if Patricia wasn't stopped. She looked at Angela. "I'll testify." 8 months later, the courtroom. The federal courthouse in Dallas was packed. Diane sat at the prosecutor's table, her hands folded, her navy suit crisp and professional. Marcus sat behind her in the gallery. Patricia Zimmerman sat at the defense table, looking smaller than Diane remembered. Her expensive clothes were gone. She wore a plain blouse and slacks. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Accusation, stood to deliver her opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about a predator. A woman who weaponized racism and systemic bias to steal hundreds of thousands of dollars and destroy innocent lives in the process." She turned to Patricia. "The defendant didn't just commit fraud, she committed psychological violence. She chose victims she believed would be easy targets, black women traveling alone, because she thought no one would believe them. She thought their word would be worth less than hers, and for a while she was right." Jennifer walked to the jury box. But then she picked the wrong target. Diane Carter didn't back down. She didn't accept the injustice. She fought, and because of her courage, we're here today. The jury was riveted. Over the next 2 weeks, the prosecution presented a devastating case. They showed the airport surveillance footage, frame by frame, of Patricia planting the bracelet in Diane's bag. They brought in the other victims, 3 black women who testified through tears about being falsely accused, arrested, and publicly shamed. One woman, a teacher named Monique Lewis, described losing her job after being charged with theft. Even after the charges were dropped, the school board forced her to resign. Another, a nurse named Renee Thompson, talked about the panic attacks she still suffered 2 years later. By the time Diane took the stand, the courtroom was electric with tension. Jennifer approached gently. "Ms. Carter, can you tell the jury what happened on March 14th at DFW Airport?" Diane took a breath. Then she told her story, calmly, clearly, exactly as it had happened. She described the accusation, the photo, the planted evidence, the looks on people's faces. "I'll never forget the way people stared at me," Diane said quietly. "Like I was guilty before anyone even checked the facts. I'd spent my entire life building my reputation, my career, my integrity. And in 5 minutes, one lie almost destroyed all of it." "What went through your mind in that moment?" Jennifer asked. Diane paused. "I thought about every black woman who'd been in my position and didn't have the resources to fight back. I thought about how many people this woman had done this to. And I thought, if I don't stand up right now, who will?" The courtroom was silent. Patricia's defense attorney tried to argue that she'd made a mistake, that she genuinely believed Diane had taken the bracelet. But the surveillance footage didn't lie. And neither did the pattern. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. "On the charge of wire fraud, we find the defendant guilty." Diane exhaled. "On the charge of evidence tampering, we find the defendant guilty." Marcus squeezed her shoulder from behind. "On the charge of making false statements to federal investigators, we find the defendant guilty." Patricia dropped her head into her hands. The judge, a stern white man in his 60s named Judge Harold Brennan, looked down at Patricia. "Ms. Zimmerman, you didn't just commit fraud. You weaponized the justice system against innocent people. You exploited racial bias for profit. And you showed no remorse, even when confronted with the harm you caused." He paused. "I'm sentencing you to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You will also pay full restitution to your victims, $427,000, and you are permanently banned from filing insurance claims for theft or loss." Patricia sobbed. But Diane felt nothing but relief. 6 months later, Diane stood at a podium in a hotel ballroom in Houston, addressing a room full of lawyers, advocates, and activists at the National Conference on Racial Justice. "I didn't choose to be a test case," she said. "I just chose not to be silent." The audience hung on every word. What happened to me wasn't unique. Black women are accused, dismissed, and disbelieved every single day. We're expected to accept it, to stay calm, to prove ourselves over and over again. She paused. "But here's what I learned. Our dignity is not up for debate. Our truth is not less valuable. And when the system tries to crush us, we have every right to fight back." The room erupted in applause. Diane smiled. "Patricia Zimmerman thought I'd be an easy target. She thought I'd be too scared or too ashamed to fight. She was wrong. And I hope my story reminds every woman in this room, especially every black woman, that you are not alone. You are not powerless, and you are absolutely worth defending." The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. Diane used part of her restitution payment to establish a legal defense fund for women falsely accused of crimes. Monique Lewis got her teaching license reinstated and is now an advocate for wrongfully accused educators. Renee Thompson started a support group for survivors of false accusations. And Patricia Zimmerman is currently serving her sentence at FMC Carswell in Fort Worth. The case became a landmark example of how racial bias is weaponized in fraud schemes, and it's now taught in law schools across the country. Because sometimes, the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun or a knife. It's a lie wrapped in privilege. And sometimes, the most powerful defense is one phone call to someone who believes you. Diane's victory wasn't just about clearing her name. It was about proving that a black woman's word, her truth, and her dignity are worth fighting for. When someone tries to frame you, stay calm. When they try to silence you, speak louder. And when they think you won't fight back, prove them dangerously wrong. Because justice doesn't just happen, it's demanded, it's documented, and sometimes it's one phone call away. If this story moved you, SUBSCRFIBE, leave a comment. Be honest, would you have stayed as composed as Diane, or would you have lost it right there in the terminal? And if you believe that truth always deserves a defense, hit that like button and share this story. Because the more we expose these injustices, the harder they are to repeat.